You walk into a dark room at night, everything is familiar walls, furniture, stillness. Then you notice a mirror, and something about it feels slightly wrong. Not visibly wrong, just off. You don't stare for long, you avoid it, or you turn on a light without thinking. That reaction is almost automatic, and most people assume it's superstition, or imagination, or childhood conditioning. But the discomfort people feel around mirrors in low light has a deeper psychological explanation rooted in how the brain constructs reality, because what you see in a mirror is not an object, it is a live simulation of yourself. And at night, that simulation becomes unstable. During the day, your brain constantly updates a model of your body using visual input, lighting, and movement. You see yourself in context: room, environment, background noise, spatial cues. The reflection feels anchored in reality because everything around it is stable. But at night, that system changes. Lighting drops, contrast increases, peripheral vision becomes unreliable. The brain relies more heavily on prediction than input. And that's where things begin to shift. A mirror does something unusual compared to everything else in a room. It does not behave like an object, it behaves like a response. It reacts instantly to your movement, it matches you perfectly, it imitates you without delay. Your brain is extremely sensitive to anything that mimics human behavior too precisely. This is the same mechanism behind the uncanny valley effect. When something looks almost human, but not quite right, the brain flags it as threatening. Not because it is dangerous, but because it violates expectations of biological authenticity. A mirror is not almost human, it is exactly human. But at night, under low lighting, small distortions begin to appear. Shadows alter facial structure, features flatten. Depth perception becomes inconsistent, eye contact becomes ambiguous, and the brain starts doing something subtle but important. It begins treating the reflection less like a passive image and more like another agent, something that is there. This is where discomfort begins, because your brain is not fully aware that it is looking at itself. It knows logically, but perception operates faster than logic. So, in dim conditions, the reflection can feel like something occupying space independently of you. That slight delay between recognition and interpretation is enough to create unease. There's also another factor at play: threat detection in low visibility environments. For most of human evolution, nighttime was dangerous. Limited vision meant predators could approach unseen. The brain adapted by becoming hyper alert to ambiguous shapes and movement in darkness. When sensory information becomes incomplete, the brain fills gaps with prediction, and those predictions tend to err on the side of caution. A reflective surface in low light produces exactly that kind of ambiguity. It is visually active, but not fully interpretable. It moves, but not independently. It exists in your environment, but behaves differently from everything else in it. So your threat system stays partially engaged. Not because you're afraid of mirrors specifically, but because the conditions that make mirrors visually unstable are the same conditions that historically increase survival risk. There's also a cognitive loop that intensifies the effect. When you notice discomfort, you naturally look again. You check the mirror, you analyze it, but each repeated glance increases attention, and increased attention heightens sensitivity to minor visual distortions. Shadows feel deeper, movement feels more noticeable, your brain starts overinterpreting normal visual noise. This creates a feedback loop between perception and anxiety. The mirror hasn't changed, your attention has. In extreme cases, especially in very low light, people can experience a phenomenon known as the Troxler effect. When staring at a fixed point, shadow peripheral details begin to fade or distort. Combined with darkness and fatigue, facial features in a mirror can appear to subtly shift or lose definition, not because anything is happening, but because the visual system is degrading input reliability. The brain does not interpret this as a technical limitation, it interprets it as uncertainty. And uncertainty, evolutionarily, is treated as risk. There's also a deeper psychological layer. Mirrors force self recognition, and self recognition is not a neutral process. It requires the brain to continuously verify identity. That is me. At night, when cognitive control is lower due to fatigue and reduced sensory input, that verification process becomes less stable. You're not doubting your identity consciously, but the reinforcement of it becomes weaker. So the reflection can feel slightly detached, slightly unfamiliar, not another person, not fully you either, just something in between. This is why mirrors and darkness are often avoided in cultural folklore and superstition, not because they are supernatural, but because they reliably trigger ambiguity in perception under conditions where the brain is least confident. Human beings do not fear mirrors in the dark because mirrors are dangerous. They react because mirrors expose a fragile part of perception: the fact that your brain is constantly constructing reality in real time, And under the wrong conditions, that construction becomes less stable. And in that instability, even something as familiar as your own reflection can feel briefly unfamiliar.